Hi, my name's Cordy, and I've always thought of myself as kind of a philosopher first, sort of a guitarist second, probably a supermarket worker third. This is going to be a video talking about an idea or a question that I've just had in the shower. For some reason, thoughts like this tend to happen in the shower. Potentially I'm spending too much time in the shower. So just now I recorded a video with the Line 6 Pocket Pod on the warming up preset into the Strymon timeline, and feeding that was the Ibanez SD9, which is a pedal from the 80s. The Pocket Pod is obviously quite old and quite budget, and the Strymon timeline, as you know, is definitely not budget, but is now about a decade old. And I was kind of thinking, what is the timeline of tone, or is there one? To me, kind of the measure of whether something is worth anything to me is whether I find any inspiration from using it. So the moments that I've had inspiration this week I can sort of remember, and one of those was just now with the Pocket Pod. Another one was earlier in the week. I was doing some demos for Tone Junkie with Trainwreck profiles. For some reason I seem to really like Trainwreck tones. Check out Keith Williams from 5 Foot Wild's latest video on that if you're interested in Trainwreck, or even if you're not, you don't know that you're interested. Definitely some super cool amps that were made. So yeah, I wanted to think about maybe the timeline of tones. So back in the 50s, I think, is when Fender started bringing out amps. And I think the 50s era Fender amps and 60s era Fender amps are regarded to be some of the finest amps, I think, made for clean tones and for certain things. And I don't know that anyone particularly would favour what Fender are making now over what was made then. Then another thought that I had was we got like the Fender Telecaster and the Stratocaster from the 50s and 60s. Again, I feel like there's no one that would favour a modern Fender over one of those sort of pre-CBS Fenders. Why is that? I don't really know. Certainly cost is a factor, and I don't know that many of us ever have a chance to play like a vintage instrument. I hear from people like that pedal show and stuff like that there's a definite kind of difference if you get a good one. But then I also hear on the other hand that guitars that are made today are more consistent than they've ever been. So it's kind of difficult to track that timeline, if you get what I mean. So in the 60s, for instance, the Vox AC30, there's an era there in the 60s where they're sort of regarded to be some of the finest Vox amps ever made. And I don't know that anyone would prefer, you know, like a modern Vox amp over what was produced back then. Although in terms of reliability and stuff, there's a good chance that like a hand-wired Vox from this era might kind of be more reliable or something like that. On this same kind of trajectory, the Ibanez TS10 is like my favourite tube screamer, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I've compared it to a lot of other stuff, and for some reason that just seems to work really well for me. And the Ibanez SD9 is again from the 80s and not exactly particularly famous or whatever, but I think at some stage might become a little bit collectible. But that to me sounds really good, does a really good thing. I think it shares a chip with the TS10. But would anyone reasonably pick a modern day Ibanez pedal over those? I'm not sure. I'm thinking, does that track in the modelling world? Like, would there be some people that are going to prefer the tone fundamentally of like an Axe-Fx Ultra to a modern day Axe-Fx? You know, like the tone of a Pocket Pod versus a Helix. Is there at some stage going to become this kind of retro fascination with what used to be? You know, maybe the chips that they used to use in the old Line 6 stuff that were cheaper and did a less good job of translating. Maybe in some ways that had favourable impacts on the tone or whatever. I know Kemper use a fairly dated chip now, but I think at the time even it wasn't particularly a modern chip, and the argument made was that this is kind of better for audio, and maybe that's the case, I don't know. So this is me kind of questioning whether the kind of product cycle and all that stuff is actually in the pursuit of better tone or whatever, or is there even a pursuit for better tone? Or am I as a person just getting caught up in sort of marketing essentially? If I can get a perfectly serviceable tone that inspires me out of this older, cheaper gear, should I even care about what's coming out now? I don't know. Maybe you've got an answer for that. A lot of questions in it. No answers. Not really sure how to end this video. Anyway, you excited about anything that's coming out at NAMM? You weren't there. Talking of modern day tube screamers that I actually like, the Green Rhino is pretty good. Probably do a video on that at some point. Thank you for stopping by. If you want to like and subscribe, you could. Most of my videos actually have a purpose. This one Didn't really. I'm just asking questions, aren't I?